Local gang members had been harassing the supermarket for weeks, coming in, demanding money, making threats. Police had been called, but nothing changed. That evening they came again, but this time the old security guard was waiting at the door. He talked to them, just 2 minutes. The gang leader asked him something. The old man rolled up his sleeve. The gang members immediately backed away and never returned. The store manager wondered, what was on that man's arm that made hardened criminals walk away? Welcome to the Unsung Heroes Stories. Before we begin this powerful story of respect, authority, and hidden strength, tell us in the comments, from which city are you watching this video today? And if you believe some men command respect without saying a word, hit that subscribe button. These stories matter. Valley Fresh Market sat on the corner of East 47th and Woodland Avenue in Cleveland, Ohio. It wasn't the biggest grocery store in the neighborhood, but it served the community. Families buying weekly groceries, elderly residents picking up prescriptions, workers grabbing lunch during their breaks. The store had been family-owned for 32 years. Frank Castellano had built it from nothing, working 18-hour days, knowing every customer by name. Now, his son Tony ran the day-to-day operations, trying to keep the family business alive in a neighborhood that had seen better days. The area wasn't dangerous exactly, but it wasn't safe either. Break-ins happened, shoplifting was constant, and lately there had been new problems that wore colors and traveled in groups. That's why Tony had hired security. Not a big company with fancy uniforms and radios, just one man. An older guy who'd answered a simple classified ad, security guard needed. Night shift, must be reliable. The man who'd walked into Tony's office 3 months ago didn't look like much. Mid-60s, gray hair, weathered face, wore a simple black uniform shirt and dark pants. No security company patches, no intimidating gear. Just quiet confidence and eyes that seemed to see everything. His name was Robert Bobby Kowalski. On paper, he was just another retiree looking for part-time work. His references checked out, previous security jobs at office buildings and parking garages. Nothing flashy. Nothing that stood out. Bobby worked the evening shift, 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. He walked the store, checked the parking lot, made sure everything stayed peaceful. Customers liked him. He was polite, helpful, never aggressive. Staff respected him because he did his job without drama. What they didn't know was that Bobby Kowalski had habits that most security guards didn't develop. The way he positioned himself where he could see all entrances simultaneously. How he automatically cataloged every person who entered, noting clothing, behavior, potential threats. The fact that he could tell the difference between teenage mischief and real danger just by watching someone's posture. Habits learned over 26 years in the United States Army. The Woodland neighborhood had its problems, but most residents were good people trying to live their lives. Single mothers working 2 jobs, elderly folks who'd lived there for decades, young families starting out. But every neighborhood has its shadows. And lately, those shadows had been getting bolder. The Iron Wolves weren't a major gang. Maybe 15 members, mostly teenagers and young men in their early 20s. They dealt drugs on street corners, tagged buildings with spray paint, and generally made life harder for everyone else. Their leader was Marcus Tank Williams, 24 years old, 6'3", 240 pounds of muscle and attitude. Tank had done 2 years in county jail for assault and came out meaner than when he went in. The Iron Wolves had a simple business model. Find small businesses that couldn't afford serious security, demand weekly protection payments, and make life miserable for anyone who refused. They'd hit the dry cleaner down the street first. Old Korean couple, barely spoke English, $50 a week or broken windows. The couple paid, then the corner bodega, family from Yemen, 3 kids to feed, $75 a week. They paid too. Now it was Valley Fresh Market's turn. The first visit had been 2 weeks ago. 3 iron wolves walking in during the dinner rush, spreading out through the store, not buying anything, just walking around, letting people see them, making their presence known. Tank had approached the customer service counter where 17-year-old Maria was working her after-school job. "Nice place," Tank had said, looking around slowly. "Be a shame if something happened to it." Maria had called Tony, who'd come out from the office. Tank had been polite but clear. The store needed protection. For just $100 a week, the Iron Wolves would make sure nothing bad happened. Tony had told them to leave. Tank had smiled and said they'd be back. They'd returned 3 days later. This time, 6 members, staying longer, being louder. One of them, accidentally, knocked over a display of soup cans. Another bumped into an elderly woman hard enough to make her stumble. Tony had called the police. The responding officer, a tired-looking sergeant named Murphy, had taken a report and promised to increase patrols. But everyone knew patrol cars couldn't be everywhere all the time. The third visit was a week ago. 8 iron wolves, more aggressive. They'd blocked aisles, intimidated customers, and made it clear that the price had gone up. $150 a week, or problems would escalate. That's when Tony had realized he needed help. Real help. Bobby had worked security long enough to recognize the pattern. He'd seen it in Kosovo, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. Different uniforms, different languages, but the same basic dynamic. Organized groups using intimidation to extract tribute from those who couldn't fight back. He'd noticed the Iron Wolves during their second visit. The way they moved through the store wasn't random. It was tactical. They were mapping exits, identifying hiding spots, cataloging security measures. Bobby had stayed in the background that night, watching, learning. The gang members were young, undisciplined, but not stupid. They knew how to project threat without crossing lines that would bring serious police response. After they left, Tony had found Bobby in the break room, sitting quietly with a cup of coffee. "What do you think?" Tony had asked. Bobby had looked up with calm eyes. "They'll be back, and next time they'll want an answer." "What kind of answer?" "The kind that means you either pay or fight." Tony had run his hands through his hair. "I can't fight them. Look at this place. I've got teenage employees, elderly customers. Someone could get hurt." Bobby had nodded slowly. "Someone could. So what do I do?" Bobby had stood up, straightened his uniform shirt. "You let me handle it." "Handle it how?" "My way." The fourth visit came on a Tuesday evening. 8 iron wolves again, but this time Tank was with them. They entered just after 7 p.m. when the store was busy with after-work shoppers. Bobby was waiting. Tank walked through the automatic doors like he owned the place. His crew spread out behind him, falling into their usual intimidation formation. Some customers noticed the tension and quietly moved toward the exits. Others, focused on their shopping, didn't realize what was happening. Bobby stood near the customer service counter, hands behind his back, watching. Tank approached slowly, sizing up the older security guard he'd heard about but hadn't met. What he saw didn't impress him. Gray-haired man in a simple black uniform, no weapon visible, no backup. "You must be the new security," Tank said, stopping about 6 feet away. Close enough to be threatening, far enough to avoid immediate confrontation. "I am," Bobby replied calmly. "I'm Tank. These are my boys." He gestured to the iron wolves scattered throughout the store. "We need to talk to the manager about business arrangements." "Store's closed for that kind of business," Bobby said. Tank smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "See, that's where you're wrong, old man." This is exactly the kind of business this store needs to be open for. Bobby didn't move, didn't change expression. I'm asking you politely to leave. And I'm telling you politely that we're not going anywhere until we talk to Tony. Other customers were definitely noticing now. A mother with two small children quietly abandoned her cart and headed for the door. An elderly man buying prescriptions at the pharmacy counter glanced nervously toward the confrontation. Tank stepped closer. You seem like a reasonable guy. So let me explain how this works. We provide security services to local businesses, protection from theft, vandalism, troublemakers, very reasonable rates. Store already has security, Bobby said, gesturing to himself. Tank laughed. Brother, no disrespect, but look around. There's 8 of us and 1 of you, and you're what, 65? 70? This isn't a job for old men. Bobby's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his posture. Almost imperceptible, but Tank noticed it. The older man suddenly seemed steadier, more grounded. How old do you think I am? Bobby asked quietly. Tank frowned, thrown off by the unexpected question. What? I asked how old you think I am. I don't know, man. Old. What's that got to do with anything? Bobby looked Tank directly in the eyes. I'm 68 years old. I've been walking and fighting for more years than you've been alive. Age doesn't make you weak. Experience makes you dangerous. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Tank's crew had stopped their casual wandering and were watching the exchange more carefully. This wasn't going the way these conversations usually went. Fighting? Tank repeated. What, you some kind of tough guy, old man? Bobby was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached up and slowly began rolling up his left sleeve. The tattoo was faded, but clear. On his forearm, in black ink that had grayed with age, a paratrooper's wings above the words 82nd Airborne. Below that, in smaller script, 1973 to 1999. Tank stared at the tattoo, his confidence faltering slightly. He knew enough about military service to recognize what he was looking at. Airborne meant elite. 26 years meant career soldier. Bobby rolled the sleeve up further, revealing more ink. Combat infantry badge, ranger tab, and at the top near his elbow, a faded tattoo that made Tank's blood go cold. Death before dishonor, with a skull wearing a green beret. Special Forces. You served? Tank asked, his voice losing some of its edge. 3 wars, Bobby said simply. Grenada, Panama, Desert Storm. 2 tours in Somalia. Retired as first sergeant. Tank's crew was getting restless, sensing their leader's hesitation. One of them, a 19-year-old called Junebug, stepped forward. So what, Tank? Old man was in the army. That was like 100 years ago. Bobby turned his attention to Junebug. What's your name, son? Why? Because I'm trying to be polite. Junebug looked to Tank for guidance, then back to Bobby. Junebug. Junebug. You ever been in a real fight? What kind of question is that? The kind that might save your life. Bobby's voice remained calm, conversational. I'm not talking about jumping someone 3-on-1 behind a liquor store. I'm talking about fighting for your life against someone who's trying to kill you. Junebug puffed up. Man, I ain't scared of... I've killed 37 men, Bobby interrupted quietly. With rifles, with knives, with my hands. Men who were trying to kill me and my soldiers. Men who were better trained and better equipped than you. The store had gone completely quiet. Even the muzak seemed to have stopped. Bobby continued, his voice never rising above conversational level. I'm not telling you this to threaten you. I'm telling you this so you understand what you're dealing with. You think you're hard because you scare shopkeepers and teenagers. I've fought actual killers in actual wars. Tank found his voice. This ain't a war zone, old man. Bobby looked at him steadily. No, it's not. And that's the only reason you're still standing. The confrontation had shifted completely. What started as 8 young men intimidating one older security guard had become something else entirely. The Iron Wolves were no longer the predators in the situation. Tank tried to reassert control. Look, we don't want any trouble. Yes, you do, Bobby interrupted. Trouble is exactly what you want. You want people to be afraid of you. You want them to give you money to avoid that trouble. He gestured around the store. These people, the mother buying groceries for her kids, the old man picking up his heart medication, the teenager working her first job, they don't deserve to be afraid in their own neighborhood. Bobby took a step toward Tank. Not aggressive, just closing distance. So here's what's going to happen. You and your crew are going to walk out of this store. You're not going to come back. You're not going to bother the owner, the employees, or the customers. And you're going to find a different way to make your money. Tank's jaw tightened. And if we don't? Bobby was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. Then you'll learn the difference between playing tough and being tough. You threatening us? I'm offering you a choice. Bobby's voice remained calm. Walk away now with your dignity intact, or find out why the Army spent 26 years teaching me how to handle people who hurt innocent folks. One of Tank's crew, a kid named Deshaun, tugged on his leader's jacket. Man, let's just go. This is weird. Tank shook him off, but Bobby could see the uncertainty in his eyes. The gang leader was trying to calculate odds, assess risks, figure out how to save face. Bobby made the decision easier for him. Tank, he said quietly. What's your real name? What? Tank's not the name your mother gave you. What's your real name? Tank hesitated. Marcus. Marcus, you got family, Marcus. Why? Because somebody raised you. Somebody cared about you, and I'm guessing they didn't raise you to shake down grocery stores and scare old ladies. Marcus looked away, jaw working. Bobby continued. You're a big guy. You're smart, I can see that. You got leadership skills or these boys wouldn't follow you. You could do something real with your life instead of this. This is what we got, man. This is the street. No, Bobby said firmly. This is what you chose. The street doesn't make decisions for you. You make decisions for yourself. For a long moment, the store was completely silent. Customers who hadn't fled were watching from a safe distance. Employees stood frozen behind counters. Even the Iron Wolves seemed to be holding their breath. Marcus looked at Bobby's tattoos again, then at his own crew. They were young, scared, and looking to him for direction. For the first time in months, Marcus saw them clearly, not as soldiers in his gang, but as kids who'd followed him down a path that only led to prison or death. This isn't over, Marcus said finally. Bobby nodded. Yes, it is. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Bobby's voice carried the weight of experience. You can keep doing this until you end up dead or in prison, or you can walk away and figure out something better. But either way, it's over here. Marcus looked around the store one more time, then at Bobby. Something in the older man's eyes, not threat, not anger, just certainty, told him that this fight couldn't be won. Let's go, he said to his crew. They moved toward the exit, but Bobby called out once more. Marcus. The gang leader turned back. You ever want to talk about doing something different with your life, you know where to find me. Marcus stared at him for a moment, then nodded once and walked out. The Iron Wolves never returned to Valley Fresh Market. Within a week, word had spread through the neighborhood that the grocery store was under the protection of someone who shouldn't be messed with. Tony found Bobby in the break room after the confrontation, sitting quietly with his coffee like nothing had happened. What did you say to them? Tony asked. The truth, Bobby replied. Which was? Bobby rolled his sleeve back down, covering the tattoos. That some fights aren't worth having. And they just listened. Smart people usually do. Tony sat down across from him. I had no idea about your military service. Why didn't you mention it when I hired you? Bobby shrugged. Didn't seem relevant. You needed a security guard, not a war story. But it was relevant. All of it. Maybe. Bobby finished his coffee and stood up. But the point wasn't to fight them. The point was to make sure nobody had to. Over the following weeks, things changed in the neighborhood. The Iron Wolves still existed, but they found other ways to make money. Some got jobs. A few, including Deshaun, enrolled in community college. Marcus himself disappeared for a while. When he resurfaced, he was working construction and had cut ties with the gang. He never spoke to Bobby again, but sometimes he'd nod when their paths crossed. Bobby continued working security at Valley Fresh Market. Customers got used to seeing him there, a quiet presence who made them feel safe. Kids would wave to him, elderly shoppers would stop to chat. He never mentioned his military service unless directly asked, and when people did ask, he'd answer briefly and change the subject. 3 months after the confrontation, Tony's father Frank came by the store during Bobby's shift. Frank was in his 70s now, officially retired, but still keeping an eye on the family business. He found Bobby doing his usual patrol, checking locks and exits before the store closed. You're the security guard Tony hired, Frank said. Yes, sir. Frank studied him carefully. My son tells me you handled some trouble a while back. Just doing my job. He also tells me you're military. Army? Bobby nodded. 26 years. Frank extended his hand. Marine Corps. Vietnam, 68 to 70. They shook hands, and Frank noticed the firm grip, the direct eye contact. What unit? 82nd Airborne, some special forces. Frank's eyebrows went up. Green Beret? For a while. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, two old soldiers recognizing each other. Thank you, Frank said finally. For what? For taking care of my family's place. For doing it right, Bobby nodded. It's a good store. Good people. Good people deserve to feel safe in their own neighborhood. Yes, sir. They do. Frank clapped him on the shoulder and headed for the exit. At the door, he turned back. Bobby? Yes, sir. If you ever need anything at all, you call me. Understood? Bobby smiled. Understood. 5 years later, Valley Fresh Market was still thriving. The neighborhood had improved, partly due to increased police patrols and community involvement, but mostly because word had spread that certain businesses were under the protection of people who shouldn't be tested. Bobby still worked security, though he'd cut back to part-time. At 73, he moved a little slower, but his eyes were just as sharp and his presence just as reassuring. The Iron Wolves were ancient history. Some former members had straightened out their lives. Others had moved away or gotten arrested for crimes in different neighborhoods. Marcus had become a foreman for a construction company and was married with 2 kids. One evening, a new gang tried to establish territory in the area. 3 teenagers full of attitude and bad ideas walked into Valley Fresh Market during the dinner rush. They lasted exactly 4 minutes. Bobby didn't have to show his tattoos this time. He didn't have to raise his voice or make threats. He simply walked over to them, looked them in the eyes, and said 6 words. This store is under my protection. They left immediately. Because sometimes respect isn't about fear. It's about recognizing real strength when you see it, and real strength doesn't need to announce itself. It just is. So tell us, have you ever encountered someone like Bobby Kowalski? Someone whose quiet presence commanded more respect than any show of force? Someone whose military service taught them that the best battles are the ones you win without fighting? Share their story in the comments. Tell us their name. Honor the quiet protectors who keep our communities safe. Because at the Unsung Heroes Stories, we believe that heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear security badges and patrol grocery stores. Sometimes they serve in silence, asking for nothing but ready for everything. Subscribe if this story moved you. We share these forgotten heroes' stories every week. And remember, next time you see a security guard or someone in a service job, look twice. You might be standing next to someone who's seen more, done more, and sacrificed more than you could ever imagine.